Hello, welcome back to the sixth instalment of the Intellectual Abattoir podcast. This is the sixth episode, and our guest is, if you paid attention to the thumbnail of the title, Tony Marrese Part 1. Part 1 of Who Knows. There's no way that you could even scratch the surface of some of Tony's thoughts and beliefs and experiences and the things he's researched in one episode. I mean, it would be like I did ever watch Dan Carlin's Hardcore, or listen, sorry, to Dan Carlin's Hardcore Histories. I mean, you'd be talking like 12 hours and I still don't think you'd be halfway there. But no, this is the fun thing about being on a journey, about being on, we're all on a journey, but just opening up. I used to be very, 5 years ago, if I'm honest, some of this stuff I probably would have been a bit like, what's he on about? A bit much for me. Maybe some of it, you might think it's a bit much for you. But I think since the pandemic, certainly, and just seeing how things are and maturing as a person and realising it's not vulnerable or weak to accept things that you might not understand and just sort of like entertain ideas about dismiss. What the fuck you want about, you idiot? Oh, Jesus Christ, like that sort of matter of fact, that kind of very cynical kind of, it's very, very, very toxic masculine trait to be kind of overly cynical and dismissive. Lots of bollocks, isn't it? I'm going to talk bollocks. That I used to be that guy. I'm trying not to be that guy. And anyway, so we talk about a lot of stuff. Talk about another. I don't want it to be the back episodes. I know Craig Campbell's story a lot about was his health, and Tony's had some bad health. We could get back into that again. He mentions it at the start, but some very interesting stuff about just the aspect of humanity that the Matrix, if you can call it that, is sort of like concentrating on, trying to get us to focus on the sort of more negative aspects of existence. Anyway, it's a good conversation. Try not to interrupt him. I mean, I'm going to get maybe the interruption drinking game going. And I just wanted to say, I've always had a problem with interrupting people, but it's not because I think I don't interrupt someone if I think like to shut them up. I think it comes from a place of emphatic agreement and trying to bond with someone. And so interject and interrupt, I don't know the difference. But anyway, I'm really trying to get the lighting better, trying to get everything better. I'm trying to get the way I interact with people better. So I thought I was quite good at not interrupting. But so it'll be fun, I think, to get back to episode 50 and then look at episode 6. Sorry, get to episode 50, look back and go, I used to interrupt more than I did. Maybe I'm learning how to talk to people at fucking 50 years of age. But anyway, so I dub him Dr Tony Marrese because this guy knows a lot about the alternative viewpoints. So anyway, let's get into it. And here he is, as if by magic. As I wish we'd been recording, because me and the great Tony Marrese, here he is, two old men trying to get Skype to work was actually quite funny, I thought. That was a bit like, click this, no that, what's this? And you Google it. But anyway, how are you doing, brother?
Not all technology is evil, but it's all difficult often. I'm all right.
Good. So I know I'll get a bit of background. I probably would have touched upon it in the introduction. You were fucking hilarious. You always will be a hilarious bloke, but you used to do stand up. A little theme. I generally tend to talk about the first time I meet people, and I remember the first time I met you very well. Do you remember it?
I don't remember my kids' birthdays.
I'm a bit.
So. I've got this is genuine. I have no recollection of anything from childhood, hardly.
Oh.
Everything gets wiped.
Right.
So I don't worry about it, but if you start talking about it, I will remember it.
Right. It was at the Tottenham Chances.
But oh my God, yeah. Yes.
I've got a mental memory.
Say, yeah.
I remember everything. And it's a music venue, and I'd never met you before, and you were MC, and you had a little. I just looked at you, and I was like, I don't know, I didn't know. I'm not in any way. Don't take this the wrong way, but I don't know. You always think, I wonder what they're like. We were all like, well, I don't know where you were at the time. I wasn't getting paid, and you sort of, when you've been doing the open mic circuit, you kind of don't. You sort of expect everyone to be a bit shit because that's just what you're used to seeing. like sitting through 10 acts that don't know what they're doing. But you were so fucking funny. Do you remember there was a because it was a music venue, there was like a piano on the stage behind you, and you just went over to it and you went,
I remember.
yeah, you hit a key and went ding, name that tune, and everyone just went no, and you went ding, auto glass repair, auto glass replace. It just made me laugh. But that was a long time ago, man. But you were always a really naturally...
God, that's years.
Years ago, like maybe 12, 13, 14 years. But it was really, you know, like you sort of think Funny Bones is just a, like an analogy. But I think like when I met you, I was like, oh, that autoglass thing. I was like, and this is the biggest compliment I think you can pay a comedian. I don't know why it's funny. It just is. I couldn't even tell you why it was. It's just, that's just you, I guess. But anyway, you're no longer doing comedy, I understand. This is a shame.
No, I stopped because of ill health and just basically ill health and the anxiety it was giving me over cancelling gigs. So I was actually in an all right place where I had lots of gigs. I was doing the ones abroad for the Sensatori. I was doing the Royal Caribbean cruise ships. I was doing some actually all right paid gigs and lots of corporate stuff at Christmas, but I had such problems with what it turned out to be my gallbladder, and I was in agony sometimes for like a week at a time, and it was driving me nuts. And I'm still kind of like getting over all of this shit now. That I had to stop because I couldn't face the anxiety of like, is that pain going to arrive on a Friday morning? I have to phone up the agent, and you know what it's like cancelling gigs. It's very difficult for the agent, for the booker, especially if like you're on a poster. Exactly. Not that I was like, it's not even that, you know, I was not anywhere in the respect of, oh look, he's a name, let's go and see him. But they're relying on you because you do a certain thing and you're part of that bill, and they've booked it up. And then if you throw that spanner in over and over again into the works, it just causes too much chaos, and I had to reluctantly quit.
And when you're ill, anxiety, stress is like the worst thing, isn't it? And so I can imagine it sort of like gets exponentially worse.
Yeah, it's terrible. Not only was I was missing daytime work, I was missing family functions, I was missing everything. I mean, when those pains come, and they are actually hilariously supposed to be the only pain that a man can experience, which is equal to childbirth.
Fuck, yeah.
When those pains would come, I mean, you could take like 8 ibuprofen. I had the strongest weed oil you can get with with THC in it. It would make you a little bit, you may take the edge off a touch, but you're just in agony until it passes. And I didn't know what it was, so I couldn't even start treating it holistically because I kept getting misdiagnosed by doctors over and over again for 2 years. And sometimes I'd be lying in a hot bath, stoned out of my head, and I mean boiling hot, like just trying to, like just in a fetal position, just go, please God, please make it go away, please God, please. That's fucking terrible, man.
Just trying to survive that next hour when it's. I've had chronic pain.
Yeah.
I've had extreme pain, but like you know, when you do something, you know it's not going to last forever. That's worse. You know, like when something like that's just coming internally, you don't know what's causing it or when it's going to go away. But when you're in that sort of pain, where I've just got to get through the next 10 minutes at a time, just survival.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, I think it grows you as a human. It grows your tolerance, obviously. It grows you spiritually. More importantly, I think through suffering, shit happens. You know, like leaving the house and going on an adventure, more stuff happens than if you sit at home watching TikTok. Going through pain and going through these suffering, stuff changes in your life. And that was kind of, you know, I'm still going through this process now, and I've realised after much investigation and being to all sorts of doctors, including allopathic, several times privately and NHS, and getting absolutely nowhere, you realise in the end that it's all about what you've got locked inside, emotion-wise, trauma-wise, anxiety, everything that you've been programmed with in your life from childhood, and so and often even pre-life, so in other lifetimes. but mainly in this current lifetime, it all locks, it all builds up. It's like a sewage tank just building up with shit. And one day the manhole's just, it's all the shit's at the top, and the impression, I don't know if you've ever seen a block manhole.
Yeah.
You take the cover off and it looks like there's another cover there. It's all
Yeah.
full of tampons and Johnnies and turds and paper. You think, oh, there's another, and it's not. It's just everything's so backed up.
Yeah.
The Dynarod's got to come along and stick its like pole down the hole.
So.
And that's what happens to humans.
So. Okay, that's fucking amazing, mate. So when we've got all this build up, obviously you're in the process, I imagine, of removing that build up, address. You've took the manhole cover off, you've inspected it. You've maybe, I don't know where you are on your journey. I'm imagining at the beginning you've got to crack through the crust of the build up. Then you've got to sort of get like what. So just talk us through how one goes about performing an unblockage and then preventing build up. What is the secret?
First of all, you have to realize that this is why we get ill. And I mean, it's not too far of a stretch of an imagination to realize how this works. If you see how the placebo works, you'll understand it. That'll open the doorway of understanding for the mind. So people can have chronic diseases. They go on a trial drugs run, and they have a controlled placebo. And often the placebo does better. So basically, your mind is believing something so fully that it will cure you. So the mind not only can cure you, the body, you can not only cure yourself, you make yourself ill. And it's very well known that stress causes heart attacks, causes all sorts of illness. But what's not spoken about is that it's practically everything. It's everything. Every time we ingest some trauma, every time we kind of got a program pattern within us, entering us and staying there, lodged inside, it adds up. It's building up. You can just imagine it building up like the blockages in a pipe. And your body's holding it. And we suppress it with alcohol and with drugs and with, and putting it off and being busy. But eventually it's full up. And if you don't address it when it gets full up, you either have a mental breakdown, heart attack, stroke. It just bursts out, and that drainage blockage just destroys the room, and it destroys you as a person. If you're lucky and you've got the foresight to see this, or you come across the knowledge, or you embark on that process and on that journey, you can start to release it slowly and incrementally, as opposed in one big tsunami of shit that's just going to flood you. And you see people have sudden mental breakdowns. You see people having like nervous breakdowns. You see people having like heart attacks out of nowhere. Completely healthy people, and I've seen it myself. People who are joggers and athletes, and they suddenly just have a heart attack, keel over, and die. It's a build up. This is my opinion. Don't get me wrong, but it's also shared by the theories of German New Medicine, which is a type of medicine that obviously, spookily enough, out of Germany. There's books like The Body Keeps the Score. There's lots of work in this area. There's lots of eminent people that have been studying this, and this goes back millennia in various cultures, that the body keeps stuff locked inside, and you have to periodically get that shit out. Now, interestingly, if you've got a dog, for example, you see how animals do it. They go, horses and dogs, they go, they do that shake. They're literally shaking out shit. They're literally shaking stuff out of their system. In African tribes and indigenous tribes, they do it by like jumping up and down and dancing and doing all these rituals with drums and like vigorous body movements, and shouting and dancing and singing is another release. But if you're like the British person like us, you're at home going, fucking shit, fuck, are you gonna fucking good shit? And you drink a couple of cans of beer and you feel a bit better. Suddenly the anger starts coming out because the beer's released a valve. It will build up. If you're a happy person who's laughing all the time, who's in a place of joy, every time you come across negative information, or someone tries to attack you in the street, you have to process that information and let it go. That's the important trick. But British and Western culture, especially British culture, it internalizes shit and we push it down, we bury it, and then eventually it comes up in bad back, in shoulder pains, in chronic diseases, in cancer, migraines is another one. And it's a great book if anyone wants to read it, by a very eminent doctor called Dr. Sarno from the 1970s. I think I told you about this in another conversation. And it's I can't remember the name of the book, but you can find the audio book of it for free on YouTube. It's about bad backs, basically, and that there's nothing actually wrong with your back. It's just this process letting shit out into your back, because there's so much emotional build-up in the self that if it lets it all out, like I said, in one go, you're going to have a big failure. You're going to have a nervous breakdown, or you're going to literally get a heart attack or something. So what the body does, the mind, cleverly, it releases it in pockets. It releases it in like stages, like a pressure cooker, just lifting up the valve a little bit. Like, and that's where you get that bad back. And if you can hear his audio book for free on YouTube, and he explains it in scientific terms, and he cured so many people just by explaining, with a process of explaining how this works. Because there's thousands of people out there with bulging discs, with all sorts of spinal curves and abnormalities that don't have any back pain, though. This is the anomaly, Justin. It's like, you know, when they say to you, you got a bulging disc, L5 is like, it's sucking off L4, and they're like having it. All of that is real. Of course, it's real. But there's people with those abnormalities that don't have backache. So those two things don't work.
So if they've got the bulging disc, and then they're stressed and tense, and their anxiety will go there. So that's where they feel it. So I've got some questions. Really.
Goes to your weak points.
Yeah, there's questions that I think the first one listening to that is, I know what people are like, Tony, and you know what they like. You meet resistance, you meet people that go, "What the fuck are these fucking pricks on about?" Blah blah. But like you said, every scientist, every doctor would agree with you that placebos work. Is that not proof in spirituality, power of the mind? Placebos work? A scientist will tell you that. So it's the power of the mind, isn't it? And if they will agree that your mind can cause hypertension, high blood pressure, heart attack, stress, and placebos work, that to me is just all the proof you need that the mind and the body are one thing. But to go that one step further and then say some of the things you said, you know that there are people out there that would roll their eyes and go, "Listen, this fucking hippie." But it's like, whoa. You would concede placebos work, but you won't. But you don't want to know to what extent.
Well, it's cognitive dissonance. People won't accept information in that challenges their world view, their perception of the universe. And really, that's why the first thing you have to be as a person is open. First thing you have to realize is, let me just discard what I know and just take in anything that comes my way and see if it resonates with how I feel. And you look at data. There's plenty of data out there. It's whether you want to look at it or not. So when we're talking about the big COVID that happened in the last 5 years, there was data for and against it. It's whether you want to look at it, you choose to, or you don't choose to. That's the individual choice. So that's exactly where the process starts, with your own choice. Am I open or am I closed? If you're closed, it's going to be a difficult journey. If you're open, you've got a good chance of surviving and coming through the other side. So, I mean, but the data is out there, and we know, like I said a few minutes ago, it's absolutely proven that stress causes disease. They know it. It's not. No one hides that. That's not conspiratorial. That's science. People under stress, especially like business execs or people working 14-hour days,
ulcers, everything.
They get really sick. They have massive breakdowns. And they have to go off to exclusive kind of like, retreats and get massaged and noshed off and all sorts of things to bring them back into the world. But not everyone can afford that. So it's better, rather than applying the anesthetic, the bandages, the plasters of alcohol and drugs and just turning it all off. It's better to address it. It's better. And there's no better ways to address it, first and foremost, than exercising regular. Removing processed foods out of your diet,
100%.
removing sugar out of your diet. All these things will help your body in that journey. And then you have to start what's called, in some worlds, is called shadow work, or you can call it emotional trauma release. There's various ways you can do that. You do it through therapy. You could do it through like tapping. There's a mode thing called tapping, which is very effective. You get emotional trauma release massage. Or you could do something like Wim Hof breathing.
Hmm.
All these things are great modalities for releasing what's trapped inside. And it takes time for it to come out, because especially if it's built up over years. I mean, I drank loads of alcohol. Before I did comedy, I was like 19 years in clubs, DJing, and going to IAP and going abroad and doing all of them shenanigans, late night, boozing, smoking weed, playing, DJing. All of that has to be outed. And, it's the more you've done, the longer the process
Makes sense.
is of getting back. Yeah, it's just, it is. Most of it is common sense if you have an open mind.
So
And that's it, really.
like you've
But
touched upon the West, like you said, and especially Britain, we look, in your opinion, is it by design from the powers that be? I think they've divided this. Maybe we used to congregate in church on a Sunday and get spiritual and be around other humans and release it that way. I think we've been encouraged to be dismissive of our faith. Not that I'm that. I don't know where you
yeah,
are
I
on
think
the religious thing, but is it? I think is it by design or is it just a coincidence? Do you think?
no, I've been at a Friday morning regular Rudolf Steiner meeting today where we was discussing that very subject, and there's a lot of people returning at the moment to Christianity. You've seen Russell Brand,
Mm-hmm.
there's Candace Owens, like the high profile ones, and then there's lots of people in between, and then all the normal folk. And that's because we have a spiritual hollow
Mm.
inside us. And what happens on the process of awakening is first you awaken to the conspiracies. First you awaken to the information. Once you've awakened to that information, then you start seeing it's a spiritual battle. Then you start thinking, well, now I'm a spiritual being.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start thinking, fuck me, I've done no spiritual work. I don't go to church. I'm not baptized Christian. I'm not a Muslim or a Jew or a Hindu. What do I do? So then you might buy some crystals, or you might
Yeah.
fiddle about with a bit of yoga. So you got all these different paths, but essentially you're seeking because something is missing. And
Mm.
yeah, by design, religion has been tainted
I think so.
because there's great people. Yeah, of course. There's like Christianity is like, let's take England, for Britain, for example, has been mocked and it's been filled up with paedophilia. Look, you've got Islam, the terrorist religion. You've got Christianity, the paedophile religion. You've got Judaism. You've got the money control system. Each one of them's got like a trait attached to it, which makes them unattractive.
Yeah.
But within all of those faiths and all of humanity, you have great human beings doing great work. There's great Christians, great Muslims, great Jews, great atheists within all of it. But we're given a perception that's darker than the actual reality. But essentially, people are searching. They're going back to God now. They've had enough of being God
Secularism.
devoid of God. They've had enough of it, because at the end of the day, you could be Richard Dawkins and you could be dogmatic like Richard Dawkins, but once your soul starts calling, it's like and you get that calling. Everyone does, because we're all exactly the same. You have to answer it. You can suppress it with more drugs and alcohol, pretend it's not happening, or you can be open to it and start on that spiritual path. And it doesn't mean you have to believe in a man with a beard on a throne sitting in the clouds, because that's just an image created by men to control other men. That's what that is, the fear of God, and the kind of Old Testament God, the vengeful, dark, destroying God, is not actually what it's about. But it's about going inward. All the great prophets and sages and gurus have said, doesn't matter where you go, doesn't matter what you do, the journey is inward. Like Jesus says, know thyself.
Mm.
Get in. Basically, it's saying get in here, quieten the mind, quieten the voices. And once you've got in that quiet space, go inside and you'll find the answers to everything. And that's actually the journey summarized very simply. You don't need to go to any temples. You don't need to wear any funny hats. You don't need to do any of that business. All you really need to do is silence the mind and go inside. And that's where the journey starts and begins and ends. But I think, I know that there's a massive return to godliness and spirituality at the moment, because people see the darkness in the world.
Yeah.
You only have to go on Twitter for 10 minutes. You're like, fucking hell. How do we get out of this shithole?
Yeah.
You walk outside and there's like 200 grids in the sky. They weren't there 10 minutes earlier. So that can trigger you. You go on Twitter and you get triggered by what's happening in Israel, whatever your perception is there. You get triggered by the trans thing. You get triggered by everything, right wing. Just by looking, you're right wing. Just by looking at a piece of information, he's right wing, or he's left wing. All of it is divide and conquer tactics. I mean, to get into that, I mean, that's whether you want to get into that, but
get into everything, mate.
Really, at the end of the day, it is a spiritual battle. It's a battle for the consciousness of humanity. It's a battle for the control of this species. And that is like on a multi-dimensional level. It's just like the being well and unwell. Our bodies are doing things that we cannot see energetically. And we know everything is vibration. We know everything is energy. Like Tesla says, frequency, energy. I can't remember, is it energy, frequency? I can't remember the last one. But everything is, if you think in them terms, you'll understand the universe, because that is how the universe works. It works on frequency and vibration. And when we're vibrating low, which is what fear does, we can't get out of the body. We can't get out of the mind. We're stuck in it. We're stuck in a low, dense vibration. When we vibrate high in joy and gratitude, the actual vibration is higher, and we have different experiences of our everyday life, because we're creating the experience essentially. This is why people like DMT, then they like ayahuasca, and they like all these drugs, because they remove all those doorways. They open those doorways. Suddenly you're free to experience what you would experience as a guru, or you'd experience as, a sadhu, or someone who's like an ascended master. Yeah. But that can only take you so far, LSD and DMT and all those things, because it's like trying to put a roof on a house when you haven't built the walls and the foundation yet. It's all very well, but it's going to fall down, because if you haven't trained your body, like if you're in the gym, if you just start doing 200 kilo leg press like I did at 16, instead of going on to 100 kilos, you fuck up your back in an injury, you tear a muscle. So you build up slowly. Yeah. With everything. You build up slowly you build up your knowledge, your tolerance, you build up your energetic abilities. And that's what you should do spiritually as a human being, so that when that information comes into you, it doesn't overwhelm you. Otherwise, if you're doing loads of DMT hits and loads of LSD mushrooms, because you're having all these fantastic experiences of clockwork elves and fucking, giraffes with like unicorn heads and gorillas, that are pink. That's all very well and good fun, but ultimately you're jumping the gun. Yeah. You're being shown something that you're not really prepared for.
And temporary, it's like a holiday. You see it and then you go back. But like the vibration, the frequency thing again. I'm only saying like about science because people believe in the fucking. This is what I think. Like I'm sort of coming around to this way of thinking, Tony. Lately, it's not quite clear in my mind. That when I was younger, I was all fucking Dawkins and Hitchens. I loved these sort of like when I was young, and I loved these like aggressive atheists that were as evangelical as any sort of fucking priest. The way they sort of like browbeat people and sort of like tried to convince people. But it is all vibration. Even the scientists will talk about string theory. In the center of atoms, you've got a subatomic part. We've got quasars and quarks. In the center, they believe there might be 3 strings vibrating. But I've really become. What do you think about this thing that I've been thinking lately? That pornography. The reason that there's all this free pornography, and if you put stuff online, the copyright people take it down. But it's like they want us to have that. It's so low vibrational and soul destroying, and it attacks men's self-esteem, and it makes you feel shameful and guilty after watching it. It just feels like the powers that be, whoever they are. And because I don't know their name doesn't mean they don't exist, are obsessed with getting us vibrating on that low level, getting us divided, getting us There's a demoralization campaign going on. What the fuck is the end game? What are they playing at?
Well, that's a massive question. So to unpack that first part of it, like the porn, you've got that's nail on the head. Why is there so much free porn? And why are some religious kind of people, let's not name names or get into that too much, owning these websites? If you was close to God, you wouldn't own massive free porn websites. That's for me a kind of standard bit of information that you can take as gospel. You wouldn't own them. You wouldn't own websites that are kind of demoralizing to women and a lot of that low vibrational quality. But the simple answer to that is yes, all this shit is out there and freely available because it keeps you in desire, keeps you in fear, keeps you in check, keeps you controllable, keeps you low, keeps you down at the base level of the frequency wave. Down here, instead of going zzz, it's keeping you in the lower three chakras. Instead of coming up here, there's like one chakra here, one in your third eye, and the top chakra, and then you've got one even beyond that. Instead of being up here and connecting to source, to consciousness, it keeps you in the bollocks, in the perineum, keeps you down there where the sexual energy is. Like you just sit in front of the computer banging one out.
Shameful.
And how many men have done that? It's disgusting, actually. And I don't want my, I don't want my boys to be introduced into that shit world.
Same.
For example. So I try to, keep them aware that is darkness. Like it's the personification of darkness, really, because it's debasing for humanity, and it keeps us in a place where we don't want to be if we want to evolve. Now the other thing is that it's the same with drugs and alcohol and pornography and very fearful like horror movies. They not only lower your vibration, but they open you out. So suddenly your aura is big and floppy instead of being tight around you and multicolored, and it attracts entities and they get stuck to you. Now this is like a jumping the gun a little bit, but it's a very relevant piece of information that people need to hear, because especially with drugs and alcohol, when you're off your nuts, your defenses it's like imagine if it is a virus. When you like really run down and you're out and you're if you've pushed the boundaries with like staying up for hours and hours and your body's had enough and you go and do more, you're more susceptible to get ill because your defenses are down, your immune system is lowered. So if you've eaten loads of shit food, you've had loads of antibiotics and your immune system is lowered and you come across some disease, you're going to be susceptible to it. And it's exactly the same principle. When you've taken lots of drugs, when you've taken lots of alcohol, or when you're in a cinema watching a horror movie and you're like in total fear, and that fear is real, your body doesn't know whether that's like a movie or not. Yeah. Your body just interprets that as fear. So entities that are waiting for those opportunities stick to you. Now, whether you believe in that or not, that's a different kettle of fish. But I've experienced them. I've experienced them in a hardcore way. So I have first-hand experience of it, and I've read multiple books about it, and I've spoken to many people about the subject, and it's all very real. They're just other energies that are vibrating at frequencies where you just can't see them. In the same way as this room is full of radio waves and microwaves and RF waves now, I can't see them. They are here.
Of course they are.
Because I know they have to put a radio. Yeah, put a radio in front of me, turn it on, and they're all there, they're all there, the stations, they're all there and present. It's exactly the same with other entities and energies. They're here, they're outside, there's earth energies. To think that we are the only thing existing on this planet is really quite naive.
It's insane. I mean,
it's extremely naive to believe that.
Yeah.
It is insane. So if you want to be smart in your journey through this lifetime, is the best bit of information you can get. It's a very old-fashioned saying of everything in moderation. If you stick to and it's a bit like the Buddhism tenet of like find the middle path. You can have some rice wine, you can have a couple of beers, but don't get fucking hammered all the time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? If you want a kebab, have a kebab now and again. It ain't gonna kill you. But if you're eating processed food all the time, it's building up. And it's the same with all these things, and they affect you emotionally, energetically, spiritually, and health-wise. And I've abused it all of those things. And I've stayed up for like 48 hours and done Charlie and done everything and ease and banged out thousands of spliffs in my life. So I'm paying the price partly for a lot of that as well.
So if you look at some of the iconography of the past and when we were more, all of the images associated with the Antichrist or the wrong path were orgies and and it was like a decadence. And I feel like it's the opposite now. That's what the machine pushes on us, isn't it? Every advert's for processed shit and this and that, and they sneak processed seed oils into bars that they market as health bars and gym bars and protein bars, but they're full of seed oils and fructose corn syrup. And it is like, if you believe, I know this is say like whatever listens to this, I know that this is going look, some of the things people say about religion I take at face value. Some things I see as metaphors. So like when you're talking about your chakras and all that, for me, I haven't looked into that enough, but I know exactly what you mean. So I don't want that, the things that can put people off. But anyone listening to this, don't get obsessed in like, I don't believe in but there's something there, because you believe, like you said very well, people, you can't see radio waves, but you plug a radio in and tune it and you can pick up 15 channels. So you would believe they exist. Why wouldn't you believe there are other sorts of energies floating about? But listen, and then in terms of the vibration, have you heard the theory about church bells had a certain frequency that could heal and cleanse, and they removed them? And they removed them and changed them all.
You Justin, just to interject, you've frozen. Is that going to affect your recording?
No, I'm recording on a camera.
Okay.
As long as you're good.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay, am I back now or not?
Oh.
Am I still frozen?
No, you're just frozen in a. You look a bit like Plato, like your frozen image. It's nice. Yeah, it's all right. I don't mind staring at it, but I was quite enjoying watching you.
Anyway, that won't affect.
Yeah, but the church bells thing is frequency. The church bells thing is frequency again, because there's healers out there that use sound frequency. Now, I'll give you a little quick anecdotal story from my own experience of a sound bath. Now, like there's a lot of disinformation and bullshit in the mainstream, there also is an alternative.
Of course.
So we mustn't ever get attached to information. You mustn't think to yourself, well, this is how I'm talking from my own perspective. You mustn't get attached to information, because you should be able to change your mind continuously. And it doesn't mean because something is coming from some alternative voice that it's gospel and true. Same way with the mainstream. But there are healers that use sound bowls, Tibetan sound bowls, glass bowls. They use tuning forks, and they have amazing success. Now, I was a bit skeptical of all that stuff, because I thought it's another middle class kind of, here we go, lovely sound bowls. Just lie down, give us 200 quid. And I'll make you feel wonderful. And to a certain extent, there's a bit of that going on. So I had a couple of sound bath experiences. One I fell asleep in. Another one I just lay there and I was like looking at it was outdoors, and I was just looking at the birds and nothing really happened. And then I met a geezer called Gary.
Guru Gary.
I call him Gary Gong. Now this geezer, I met him for a parent at the school, and she took us to this sound bath, and I was like, oh, here we go again. I'll go. And I went with my wife, and it was about 25 adults, and we stuck all the kids in another room and watched a movie. A little bit naughty, but otherwise they would have just been running around like loons. So we were all lying down, and Gary told me his life story briefly, and he said, goes, look at this picture, and he showed me a picture of him on his phone, and he was like about 20 stone. He smoked, he drank, he had about 6 different diseases going on. He had heart problems and blood pressure. He was very sick, and he met this other bloke who was also there, and he'd got him into fasting, and he made him cut out everything. So look, the sort of stuff you've talked about in the other shows you've done, and we've just touched upon. He cut out all the bad shit, started fasting and dry fasting, and doing all of that. Now he was really lean, extremely healthy looking, and he was drinking shots of neat ginger juice, which was like drinking like a tequila. We have this gong bath. We're lying down, and he's playing this gong. It's not just going dong, dong. He's playing it. He's going, oh, yeah. It's making the most bizarre sounds, this thing, as he's putting the stick round it. And I came out of that. I woke up. I kind of opened my eyes after about 45 minutes, and he kind of woke everyone out of this slumber, you could say. And I can't explain how I was feeling, but it felt like I was not present in that room. It felt like I was in a different dimension. And if I wasn't kind of quite grounded mentally, and I hadn't experienced lots of things in my life already, I could have freaked out and kind of got myself interned in a mental hospital and drugged up. But I knew it was just a vibrational thing. It was unbelievable. It lasted for 24 hours, and I I said to my wife, "You're going to have to drive home." And she had an experience where she couldn't stop laughing. She was just in hysterics for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just going, just laughing like a nutter. And we both had this, and lots of other people had quite profound experiences as well. And this is from Gary, and he's gone. And that lasted ages. And I hadn't taken any, we hadn't taken any DMT and taken anything. We were just kind of doing it dry. And then he did it again. So I then invited him again to a friend's house in North London, about 12 of us. I didn't experience anything that time, but a friend of mine, as soon as he started playing his gong, this friend of mine, he came out of his body. He said he was flying around the room, and he could see all these other, like, entities, you could call them, like, in the room, walking about amongst us as we lay on the floor. Then he shot up into space. He said he was flying around. He went around the universe. He came down, back into the room. He had all these mad experiences, and this is just from sound vibration. So this anecdotal, but I'm sure you will find many other people that have had similar experiences.
But someone would go to the NHS, Tony, and completely say, "Oh, ultrasound cured my." I had an ankle injury from rugby, and they ultrasounded it. What's that if it's not just a fucking? I mean, but why is it done by someone in a white lab coat? And they're using sound to break down the muscle tissue in my ankle, and it worked. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
But people will go, "Oh, that's bollocks."
There's no difference.
You know people are going to be listening going, "Oh, that's bollocks," don't you? They're just fucking so closed off.
I know, and you should. Well, our job is not to try and force information down people's throats. You can only like lead the horse to water, but you can't make it think.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't try to wake people up. It's not our job. Our job is to wake ourselves up.
That's true.
And by waking ourselves up, we wake up others up by default. So once Justin Pants reaches another level of vibration, whenever you're around people, you chat to people, you interact with them, you're having an effect on them. That's why it's really important for the control mechanism, for the cabal, let's call them, because I like that word.
Yeah.
It's really important for the cabal to keep us on a low vibrational, dumbed down level, because then everybody's just in that swamp. The more people that keep waking up, it's more dangerous for them.
Of course.
Even in just terms of control.
You're not as malleable, are they? I mean, I could never. When I was younger, I was the opposite. I mean, I'm not as far down the road as you possibly, but I think that's because you've been looking into it, and yours has come from a health aspect. I mean, I've had some back issues, and the one I did with Craig Campbell, I've actually also got osteoarthritis and stuff. So I know what it's like to have these medical words attributed to you. I can't see inside my back. I don't know what I've got. But my point is that so I certainly am less malleable. I'm less perceptible. I'm less persuadable. So if you said to me, "Oh, like we had the riots the other month because of the immigration issue, whatever. I probably, if I was 20, not anything to do with politics, could get swept away, and maybe football was a better example. I could have probably been a football hooligan when I was younger. But now, because the frequency has raised a bit, you couldn't get me you couldn't control me. And I think that's why they're rushing to get us down there in the gutter with no self-respect and isn't it? So they can they can control us and make us go to war.
Well, it's quite obvious though, isn't it? I mean, when you just look at if you use Occam's razor, you look at all the information, it just all points that direction. Continuously creating wars. And how many war veterans have come out from battlefields saying this is all a scam? This is all a scam. I'll never do it again. Don't join the army. We're fighting for profits and for CEOs and for money and control. It's got nothing to do with the local population. They care about people as much as they care about a turd on the bottom of their shoes stuck in their cleats. They do not care.
No.
That's one first hurdle that you need to jump. And that's where the perception needs to change. These people who are in charge, unfortunately, at this point in time, but also, I'm going to interject myself here and put this little caveat in there. Sometimes you need the darkness. Imagine this is like a stage production, live on Earth. Every stage production has drama in it, has 3 acts to the play, and with a conclusion and an overarching narrative. If we didn't have darkness, let's go back to pre-COVID. If there was no COVID or even 9/11, we start at that point because that's kind of like one of the major points in our consciousness for people who've been around for, like, let's say 30 to 50 years and beyond. If we didn't have that, a lot of people will still be asleep. If we didn't have COVID, a lot of people, more people will still be asleep. So actually, they're doing you and I and everyone a favor. And maybe, just maybe, this is why they're doing it, maybe consciously or subconsciously. So it's quite a stretch of the imagination, but in some ways it's not. If they were not engaged in their dark, openly dark shit, how would we ever know there's a greater universe out there? If they just continued under the radar like that, just snaking along and not doing things out in the open like they do at the ceremonies, like the Olympic opening ceremonies, if they didn't do things like that and have Satanism out in the open in music videos, etc., and in concerts, how would we know that there's an undercurrent of darkness and wrong? And therefore, we wouldn't wake up, and therefore we wouldn't evolve. So really and truly, you can say that we have to thank them and applaud them. And maybe it's this, and I'm going to stretch it even a bit further, that elastic band, till it pings in your bum cheeks, is that maybe, just maybe, there's another force that's in control of what's going on in the planet. You could say it's kind of dark entities or whatever it may be. I don't know. Let's say that there was another dark force, like the Borg in Star Trek, if you're a Star Trek fan. And they're trying to wake us up to the reality that that force is in control. And what better way would you have to do it than to do it like that? Because if you just came out and said to the world, all right, there's an alien species, they're the ones flying about in all these tic-tacs, they're in control, it's not going to work. No one's going to believe you. You have to show them. So, I mean, I'm not saying I subscribe to that, I'm just giving the possibilities. But definitely within the game of life, if darkness didn't unveil itself, we wouldn't evolve. You know, we wouldn't evolve. How many people do you know now who what you would consider awake were awake pre-COVID?
I think 9/11 was a bigger one, wasn't it? Do you think that was the biggest watershed in our lifetime, 9/11?
Yeah, definitely.
I guess that's
Weapons
true.
of mass destruction is another one.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I guess it's true because again, sorry to go back to the science again. What the science community would say, there is something called dark matter. So for every photon and light particle, there is an invisible dark one. So maybe everything that exists, like you're saying, this is always two sides of the coin. 9/11 might be, if you look at it in a high vibration, it awakens you and enlightens you. And if you look at it with low vibration, it demoralizes you and takes you to that side. And maybe these are just forks in the road that we've got to just decide which way we're going to go every time.
Yeah. And it's like getting a bad back. You get a bad back, your legs are broken in a road accident. You know, I don't want that to happen to anyone. But you're lying in bed for 3 months in traction, and suddenly you start having revelations and thinking about your life because you can't engage in your busy life anymore. You can't go to work and keep making money on a daily basis. You can't. Suddenly it all stops, and maybe sometimes them things happen to stop you. Those things happen to stop you and put you on a different path. The path is splitting there because you're being guided to awakening. You're being guided to the path your soul wants you to go on, not so much your mind. Because, I mean, look at it. How much can you possibly want in life once you've got shit? This is another thing why you've got to look why there's other agendas at play, because those who we believe are pulling strings from above, they own everything.
Yeah, everything.
They own everything. If they want a yacht, they own the companies that make the yachts. They don't have space in their existence for more stuff. Look at King Charles, God bless him. You know, he's got palaces and crowns and sausage fingers, and he's got all sorts of shit that he can't possibly want for any more. So when people say, "Oh, it's all about power and it's all about greed," how can it be when you own billions of pounds and billions of dollars and all the gold and all the Ferraris? It's got to be about something else. It's either about control or it's about power and on a different level. Because materialistically, they already have everything. So that's why you have to think in bigger terms.
It's like you say, Tony. It seems like they're kind of more interested in depriving us down here of everything. Like it's like whenever they say like the COVID thing, it's like, oh, it was the greatest upward transfer of wealth in human history. And like you said, the people at the top don't want for anything. But the lower they can get us down, it seems to be like, is it to sort of like so they can keep the cycle going for generations to come? Do you know what I mean? I mean, that WEF saying you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. I mean, even just saying that, even revealing that plan, even if it never comes, just to say that to us all, it's so manipulative and abusive, isn't it? To say to the population, do you know what?
I just say,
your children, Tony, are going to own nothing and they'll be quite happy. How do you like that? It's like, what? That's just demoralising, isn't it?
thank you so much, oh Lord.
Yeah.
It's serfdom again, isn't it? It's serfdom where you lived on the land of the Lord, and he allowed you to live in a cottage, grow turnips, and you had to give 80% of your turnips to him. Then he came and shagged your wife when you got married, and you was grateful for it until some of them got their heads cut off. And cause people don't understand as well. They don't look at history, even recent history, like last 1,000 years, and see what the progression is to us having some freedoms and liberties. It's through battling and fighting. It's never been given to us by those who control and money and have these legacy families that have come down from like the black nobility in Venice, where these families have, I mean, David Icke talks about a lot of that. These family bloodlines have literally owned lots of shit for centuries and millennia. Yeah, so we've had to wrestle power off of them. We've had to wrestle like our lifestyle level in the West over like hundreds of battles. You know, lots of heads being chopped off, lots of like awful things, people being cleaved to pieces. When they talk about this white, when you talk about like white privilege and that, believe me, our ancestry have gone through some shit to get where they are now.
Of course.
Yeah, of course they have. And I mean, just to touch on that, the only reason that people can resonate with, oh, look at the whites, they've caused all this shit, it's because they're looking at that small segment of history, like they do with climate change. If you looked at 5,000 years, you would then encapsulate the Mongolian Empire, you would encapsulate the Persian Empire, the Zulu nation, and the wars between the African tribes.
So do you? Because you've been awake for a long time. So when you was a child, was you always the sort of person that thought, I don't think everything's I don't think everything's as it seems. What was your first? Even I'm not talking like your big, like what would be deemed an actual conspiracy theory, but like when you were young, did you have like a? Because for me, I've said it on here before. It was when I was in assembly and we used to sing hymns and they told us God created the earth. And then when we started doing RE, they talked about other religions, and I was like, oh, hang on a minute, I thought that was literally gospel. I thought they were telling me God created the earth. I thought He did. And then they were telling me that, other people don't think that. I was like, oh, hang on a minute. So there's more than one way to look at things, do you know what I mean? So what was your first sort of inkling that everything wasn't as you were being told?
I was reading a magazine at 15, maybe 14. I started, as my brother-in-law, God rest his soul, he's dead now.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
He brought, I don't know if he introduced me to it or if I found it, maybe a copy in W.H. Smith. It was called The Unexplained. Mm-hmm. And it came out, I think, every month or something like that. And then he, like, very nicely, is a very nice man, John, God rest his soul, he would bring it round for me. He'd buy it for me and bring it round for me when he'd come and, like, courting my sister. And I'd started reading that. And I was always interested in ghosts and paranormal stuff. So at school, I talked to people about ghosts, and most of them just want to talk about football. And when you talked about subjects like that, people just get frightened generally as well. They didn't really like it, especially if I'd read something in the Unexplained. Then I started buying 14 Times. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
And I'd read these magazines, and I'd go into school and go, let me tell you about the Sasquatch. And they'd go, right, and I go, fucking Luke, what the fuck is this geezer, man? Why don't you just want to talk about Man United? No. You know, they didn't really want to engage. A couple of people, perhaps, but so since about early teens, I started to, and it was through publications that I got introduced into many of the subjects that, you know, now my head is full of, and I've read lots about and experienced myself over the years. So a lot of paranormal activity, and ufology. So I've always been very interested in UFOs, their origin, and what they're doing here, and I still am to this day. So
Yeah.
they're the subjects, less so conspiratorial things. But then I started to realise that that power governments are hiding shit about UFOs and their knowledge of them, and I
Proved
started
right.
realising, and the big thing that I realised as well, that they hide, and this is linked to ufology and linked to everything that's going on, is the free energy. Any free energy devices that have ever been kind of like attempted to be brought out, even like carburetors that run for like 100 miles to the gallon, allow cars to run to 100 miles to the gallon. All these inventions get suppressed, and many of the inventors disappear or are suicided. And when you read that over and over and over again, you start to realize that this can't be just made up fiction. This is a reality. And that's actually probably the main reality why they keep us in the dark about ufology, because if they admitted that they had some of that technology, people would say, well, how do they run? And then they'd have to open the can of beans, Pandora's box. And suddenly it'll be like there'll be 0 point energy, and there would be anti-gravity devices, and there would, because the whole thing with Elon Musk and those rockets, they're very nice, but rocket technology is like 5,000 years old. That's when the Chinese first invented gunpowder and put it in tubes and sent rockets up as fireworks. It's the same principle, a tube with some fuel within it, and it's just firing it up. That's Stone Age technology to what we see flying about. And actually, I was trying to remember, I was going to tell you this story from, Phil Butler. Do you remember Phil Butler?
I do, yeah. Paul, God rest his soul.
Yeah, really nice. Yeah, he's dead. So Phil Butler, just very quickly, it's because it's to do with ufology. I was doing a gig with him. He was in the green room he took his shirt off, and he had a little tattoo of a classic like Von Daniken flying saucer on his wrist. And I said, "What's that?" And I said, I thought he would be interested in that subject at all. And he goes, "Do you really want to know, or are you taking a piss?" I said, "Oh, so I really want to know, Phil." So during the break, we went outside, had a fag, and he said to me he was about 20 years old. He was working in a pub with another lad, and they were working in the kitchens. They finished their shift about 1 a.m., driving home somewhere in the UK, like through these country lanes like around here. And they saw these lights in the forest to their left. He thought a helicopter or plane had crashed, or a car had gone in or something, because there was all this flashing lights. He goes, got around a corner. He said about 20, 30 meters away from him, this UFO was hovering 10 feet above the ground. And it was about as wide as a house and about 15 foot tall. Silver disc with a lump on the top. His mate shat himself and just put his foot down. And Phil was going to his mate, "God, turn back. Let's go and have a look." He was like intrigued. He wanted to know about it. This guy was just like, "I'm having none of it." He calmed down. They went back to have a look. It had gone. And they both thought it would be a good idea to report it to the police. And in these days, there was police stations.
Yeah.
So you could go to a small town and the police station
Be
would be
open.
open. Yeah. So they get to the town, they'll be open, and they won't be nicking you for Facebook posts either. So they got to this police station. Desk sergeant is there, and they start telling him the story. And he said to them, "Just fill one of these forms in, lads." He goes, "You're the 8th one in here tonight who's seen that thing." And he just had like a pile of forms, and he just gave them, and they just filled it in and put it on the pile of the filled out ones. So I'll tell you that story because Phil was a very normal bloke.
Yeah.
With not really any interest in all that shit. But when stuff comes to you and happens to you, you can't ignore it. You go nuts. It's another thing of like information. You just have to absorb it and let it pass through. Not try to externalize it, not try to diminish it. Just experience it and pass it through. And he was like intrigued by what had happened to him, and he started reading about the subject. But essentially, these things are real. They're happening wherever. They're happening on the planet. They've been happening for hundreds, if not thousands, of years here. And that's the main reason why they don't tell us about it, is because it's all to do with the technology. Because the technology would release us. Because if you had technology that wasn't fossil fuel or lithium-ion batteries, can you imagine what that would do for humanity? You'd just be, running your house on. You could be heating your home now. The pensioners would be heating their homes with devices that just are drawing in from 0 point, and we wouldn't have all this control mechanism in place.
the energy companies are drug dealers, aren't they? The people that control the oil. It's a drug that all humanity. But the thing about the Phil Butler thing and seeing a UFO, I mean, before lockdown, I might have been like, oh, he imagined that. But they just, in lockdown, for whatever reason, in lockdown, they were like, oh, actually, let's release this footage of actual fucking UFOs. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, what strange timing that you've done that in like the first month of lockdown. But do you know that I don't think UFOs, no one had seen, I think it's all, when I look at the timeline of when we started fucking around with atoms, everything's been weird, Tony. Like, they found the atomic bomb and they could split the atom, and then UFOs started showing up. Then people started seeing it around the 50s, wasn't it? Then they started seeing them. And it's just like constantly like, and then that CERN, I don't know. I think they found out. I think they've found out something. I think there's a new, and I just think that they just keep it from us because the like you say, the free energy thing. I've seen things about in Russia, some of those towers with the, you know, those sort of like Kremlin-y looking towers were transmitting free energy. Everything had these copper domes on top, and pyramids were maybe to do with free energy. I've also heard that they're to do with frequency, what we were getting on earlier. They're to do with vibrational stuff. But I just think if a drug dealer sells crack, right, and the drug dealer found out that if you mixed salt with vinegar it was the exact same effect and it was free, the last thing they would want is that information getting out, wouldn't they? Because then they're not special anymore. They're just nobody.
It's all about control, man. It's, what better way to control people than with energy and food?
Yeah.
We need energy and we need food.
Yeah.
If we don't have those two things, you know, we cease to exist. So they're not going to allow that technology out. And practically every one of those people that have discovered how to tap into it have been murdered. And I mean, even Tesla, they took down his tower in the end. I can't remember who was funding him. It might have been the Rockefeller.
He's kind of been smeared in history as well, hasn't he, Tesla?
He has. But he was smeared at the time, towards the end of his life.
Silenced.
And all his papers and books were taken by the FBI as well. When he died, they raided his place and took all his notebooks and all his papers away. He had information. He's like a Leonardo da Vinci. These people that come along and raise up the bar. You know, like, look at Leonardo da Vinci in the Renaissance around that period. Do you know what I mean? Look, that the talent of that human being raises the consciousness of everyone.
That's not good for the powers, is it? Do you know about the Phoebus? Do you know that Phoebus? What do you call it? Like a committee. Apparently, when they invented light bulbs, they work forever, and they've got this light bulb in America that's been on for like over 100 years. So all the electricity companies like GEC, Osram, all make these light bulbs. They put this Phoebus clause in that for every hour over 1,000 hours your light bulb worked, if you manufacture light bulbs, you got fined. So all light bulbs were manufactured to be disposed, or, you know, like, what do you call it, like obsolete. They break. They had like a lifespan. That just proves that they would do that. They did it with fucking light bulbs filling up landfills since the 40s or 50s, whatever. They got together and said, shit, we've made these things that last forever. So we'll sell 1 million in the first year and then we won't sell any in the second year. Then people go, oh yeah, they did that, but they wouldn't do it with oil. It's like, are you fucking insane? Why wouldn't they do it with like the most valuable resource we've got?
It always boils down to the same thing, though, doesn't it? It boils down to greed, selfishness, and power. And if they weren't selfish, I mean, let's say you could make light bulbs that lasted at least. They could have the middle ground, like I was saying at the beginning. They could go to the Buddha middle ground or the happy medium. They could have light bulbs that just lasted 2 years, or 5 years. There could be a compromise, so they still make some money, but instead of making 800 million a year, they make like 220 million. But that's not enough because people have this greed. You know, we have greed. It's part of the ego. It's part of the program in the ego. And I'm not saying I haven't had greed in my life. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't have a wealth of like sports cars, and I've got a van and a Ford S-Max. You know, we have what we need, but I don't really long for like Lamborghinis and helicopters and planes. I prefer to have experience
So sorry,
than
is that
material
what
thing.
you think they're feeding with all this low vibration stuff? Do you think they're trying to amplify that greediness? Because if they can make us greedy and feather our own nests and competitive, and that's how we do their bidding. Their shit works
And
on us. That's what they're feeding, isn't it?
of course it does. Of course it does. Look, suicide rates are the highest that they've ever been, especially amongst young men.
Yeah.
And because young men have got we've got a male, the male of the species has a drive to provide and to be to be a man. These are programs that are set in the DNA, they're set in the structure of a species. But when you turn on the computer or the TV, you see these blokes you see Joe Rogan. How are you going to be like Joe Rogan? How are you going to be like, Arnold Schwarzenegger? These are kind of the models we're given are very hard to attain. Most people are not going to attain them. So if you don't have a ceiling on your desires, or you're not kind of educated from childhood, like it's okay just to be a human and experience being a human, you're going to have these aspirations, which are kind of, even to buy a fucking house, it's difficult now. Is that aspiration of I just want to buy a flat, have a missus, and have some kids, and go on holiday and have a normal everyday life, and be a nice human being. Even that has become incredibly difficult by design. Because all of it, it's absolutely by design. None of this needs to be like this. None of it needs to be like this. Remember that they print money, they create money and the fiat system out of nothing. So that any time they want, they didn't have to take away the winter fuel allowance from the elderly.
No.
That's just a psyop on humanity.
Yeah.
That's another this is what we're doing. We're going to lock you up for what you think. And when you get old, we're going to let you get cold.
I think, rhymes. Yeah, you're right. I think that's the same as the WF saying you'll own nothing. I'm now thinking, shit, when I'm old, my life's going to be miserable. But it's like you say, so young men, right? Like you said when you was at school, that football's used as a mass drug. But they watch these football players, but they're on 250 grand a week, getting adulation from 80,000 fans at Old Trafford. Then they watch, then they go on Instagram and they've got Jake Paul flaunting his latest Bugatti. Then they go, do you know what? I feel bad about myself. I'm going to do some low vibrational dopamine. I'm going to watch some pornography. And then you look at a bloke with an 11.5-inch cock. Everywhere you look, you just feel inadequate. You feel demoralised. You feel fucking, and that just that. And they took away.
And you know
religion.
What that does? And you going back to what we was talking about, the health. That just adds more shit into your system. And then
you're fucking feathering the nest.
Self-devaluation.
Then you're feathering the nest of the pharmaceutical companies. And you're eating bad food. And you're helping out the agriculture companies. And it's just we are. For people that go on all these causes and go, free Palestine, or I'm a vegan, let's not milk cows, or where. When you just look at yourself. You are putting the average person listening to this is getting treated so bad. The average person, if you put your aside and go, well, black people are treated worse than white people, or women are treated worse than men. If you forget about those tiny, I'm not diminishing it, but if you look at the bigger picture, you are being treated fucking appallingly, and it's by design, and the system hates you and wants you to hate yourself. That's what we need to really think about.
Yeah, the best thing you can do for other people is just slowly tell them things that will help them on their journey, like health things. That's a great starting point. The things that you've discovered, but now you've been talking. I've watched the episodes. You've been talking about dry fasting and cutting out sugar and cutting out processed foods, going to the gym, watching no news, watching no negative shit, watching comedy. Actually, comedy is a very good service to humanity. It's good karma. People need to laugh. Laughter is an incredible medicine. All these things, if you just move in those directions and you go out hiking, you go out in the woods, you go swimming, you're giving cold swimming in a river, go over to the park, play football. All of these things are better than negative thought processes, because at the end of the day, Justin, this is controlling us. This is projecting out like a cinema kind of projection. Our reality is what we're creating.
Yeah.
The more negative thoughts we have, the more negative other people pick up on, the more negativity's out in the world, the more we get sick, the more we get anxious. If you're in a positive vibe all the time, you can see it. Successful people, they're smiling generally.
Yeah.
You know, they're laughing. They're not like they're being generous as well. There's another law of attraction thing you can practice. The more you give away, the more you receive.
Mm.
That's an actual universal law, and people they know that. You know,
We're
remember those in
programmed to mock
charge. This
those
is another
people, aren't we? The system makes us
Yeah,
look
but
at those.
this is
We're told to mock them, but it's fucking insane, isn't it? It's all.
they know though.
Yeah.
They know, Justin. Let me tell you, this is another great secret. Everything that they're telling you is not real. They know is real, and they practice.
Yeah.
So they tell you that God is ridiculous and spirituality is a little bit nonsense, but you can have a go and and just do. You could go over there, buy some beads, and have a laugh, but it's not really real. Whilst at the very same time they're worshipping Baal and the giant owl and all these effigies, and they do all their satanic rituals out in public and their mass executions through war. They do all of that shit, and at the same time they tell you it's not really real. It's a bit silly, isn't it?
Yeah.
And even people who were, normal everyday folk who are presenters on TV, they'll like go, they'll laugh. If you like, it's a classic thing with the UFOs for decades. That if it was mentioned in a news story, it'd always be at the end, like where you'd have the story about the cat getting caught in a tree.
The feel good story.
They'd all go, and so finally we got this cat caught in a tree. Or it could be, and finally someone's seen a light in the sky. It's probably a balloon. What do you think, Sarah? I think it's that's how it goes. But that's changing.
Mockery.
That perception is changing now as well. Yeah, mockery. They're keeping you kind of like away from information by either censoring you or mocking it or debunking it or debasing it. They're keeping you away from the reality because the herd must be kept in check, like a farmer keeps his herd in check. And really, I was going to say this earlier, just to slip this point in. It's about suppressing the vibration. Is about suppressing the raising of consciousness, which is what humanity and all life on the planet and the planet itself is going through at this very moment. And this is not me saying this. This is like the main civilization. It's been written about by sages and gurus and people in the Vedas in India. It's been written about all over the planet that this is the time of change. This is the time where everything moves forward into the next kind of Aquarian age, you could say. So to try and consolidate their power and hold on to their stranglehold over everything, they're trying to keep our consciousness low so that we don't expand. And you're expanding now. You're doing your podcast, you're interviewing people, and people watch it, and they will get a little bit more expansive in their thought processes. And this is how it works. It's a knock-on effect. That's why there's all this censorship. That's why they poo-poo things. That's why they want you to watch football. And there's nothing wrong with football, but football could be part of your life, but it shouldn't be the central focal point of your existence. You shouldn't be like worshipping Man United and putting on the kit and going, "I'll die for them."
All that,
you shouldn't be. You should be dying for yourself.
Yeah,
for
all
humanity.
that energy is not wasted. I don't mean to. I don't really like football, but it's not. But it's just sort of like instead of improving yourself, you could have the most miserable life, and your team wins the league, and then you feel good for a week. I don't know, whatever, and then. But what have you actually done? You just You're distracted from improving yourself because all you care about is who the new signing is and who you know what I mean. Who you've got next Saturday. It's just a way to occupy your I don't know what the word is. You're sort of like your consciousness. So we're gonna have to go soon because my battery will probably run out. But we've got to talk again soon. But do you just want to ask this one last question? Do you think this is the I think most things work in a wave, and waves have peaks and troughs. Do you think this is the first time humanity has done this, or do you think it's been risen before and repressed? Do you think it's a cycle, or is this are we at a forefront of somewhere we've never been before?
Oh, I mean, I've read a lot of books, and I've put a lot of effort into studying human history from an esoteric perspective and a standard perspective. So there's lots of writings about Atlantis and Lemuria and Hyperborea, these civilizations that once existed, and they're legends that exist in like the Hopi Indian oral traditions, and in, like I said, the Indian Vedic traditions, and in all sorts of like the Zulu stories. So I do believe that these advanced civilizations existed on Earth. I don't think the timeline we've been given about,
Totally.
Homo sapiens and it's 200,000 years old. I tell you, a great bloke is called Michael Cremo, and he's written many books. One of them's called Forbidden Archaeology, and this is kind of like physical proof of shit happening in antiquity that's unexplainable. And what it is his book, and it's about this thick. It's a big encyclopedic book. It's a book on archaeological finds of items that are found in rock or in coal in deposits like are 300 million years old or 58 million years old. And they're things like brass cogs, hammers, metal balls, all sorts of weird things that you think you can imagine might survive if there was a great flood and that all the planet was destroyed now by cataclysmic like meteorite, or let's say a comet hits the planet, or all the plates shift, there's a polar shift and the civilization is wiped and everything goes to the bottom of the oceans or is underneath like soil and underneath rock, and then like 200 million years later, or let's say even less 2 or 3 million years later, civilization's risen again, they're coal mining again, and they come across, and this is something that's actually happened in Russia. They were mining 2 miles deep for coal and they came across a brick wall. The photographs are all in the book. There's footprints in rock, which means that humans with a human-shaped modern anatomical foot have stepped in mud, and that mud is at the bottom of a riverbed, and it's taken like a few million years for that to harden and turn into rock, and they're now exposed again in, I think, Boulder, Colorado. There's things like that all over the planet, let alone buried pyramids in Bosnia, etc., etc. So yes, I think it's a cyclic thing that humans
again,
rise.
A vibration.
Yeah, but I think this time, I'm quite a big fan of a woman called Dolores Cannon, and she wrote lots of books. She invented past life regression, the technique for past life regression, and it's too much to talk about now in this last segment.
We'll have to have you back.
But maybe next time we could touch it. We should talk about it next time because it's super fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's got a scientific basis to it as well. But anyway, she had discovered lots of people's past lives in these civilizations like Atlantis, and they were going, and their demise is very similar to what we see now. They were messing with DNA, they were messing with nuclear technology, they were messing around with the weather,
gender
they were
as
fucking
well,
around
apparently.
with nature. Yes. So here's a great one. I made this discovery myself. Pleased to well, it's a discovery. It's totally unprovable. But in Greek mythology, you've got creatures like the Minotaur, the Centaur, Medusa. You've got the mermaids, and you think when you start to realise that there's no smoke without fire. In these legends, there's always some kind of. They're not just invented. They're not just created. These myths, they come from old stories. And I thought to myself, I bet you this is from Atlantis, when they were pissing about with DNA, and they were hybridizing between animals and humans like they do now. They were cloning sheep in the 80s. Remember Dolly the sheep? They've already been. Of course they are. You think they're not trying to make super soldiers like blokes with the power of a gorilla? Of course they are. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, I would.
So the Greeks. I would, so would I. And that's what I've often thought of joining the Illuminati, if I could only get an invite. But if you can imagine, that's Greek mythology. That's based on the past. What Plato was talking about Atlantis in historical terms, because he learnt it off of the Egyptian priests. That's Plato. That's like 3,500 years ago already. And he's talking about it in antiquity. Atlantis, they were messing around with this stuff. And their history became the myth and legend of the Greeks, which is our now myth and legend. So yes, everything's in a cycle, but I do believe that this time round, intervention is happening. Lots of humans being born on this planet that are kind of almost awakened from birth. So there's lots of awakened souls now, far more than there's ever been. And that is to stop it from not happening, to stop it happening again, stop that cycle happening again of destruction of the human race. So it has to start because it has to reset. Can you imagine if it was a cataclysm now? Look at this. We've got microphones, computers, keyboards,
Nothing,
iPhones. How could me and you, if me and you survive?
Oh my God.
And two women, we could make some kids. We could maybe make a rudimentary hut. We'd be lucky if we could make a flint spear.
Tony, we couldn't even get fucking Skype to work.
You know what I mean? Exactly. So if it resets, unless you have the vast complex.
Doc. If it resets, it's zero again, isn't it? It's zero. It's not like a relay race. You've just got to go back to the beginning.
You'd be lucky to even get back to kind of where the Amish are, where it's they've got horses and carts and.
But anyway, I don't want the battery to go flat and to be. But I'm going to call you Dr Marrese from now on. I feel that could have talked to you for about 6 hours, mate. Maybe I need to plug my camera in next time and I'll just do a super long one. But thank you so much for doing this, and it's really lovely to see someone not feeling sorry for themselves with health issues. Same with Craig Campbell, to be proactive outside the tram lines of what they fucking tell you. More power to you, man. And I'll definitely get you back on. Thank you so much, mate.
No worries, Justin. It's lovely to talk to you, mate. And let's do it again, and I'll tell you about some other fascinating bits.
We could do this every week, bruv. Nice one.